I guess we'll see.
Well, it's true or it's not, and I think it's
Mhm.
true. My name is Doug Brunke, and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Chamber. We love to do leadership programs at Global Chamber because it's something you never stop learning about. I joke that I've read about a dozen books by John Maxwell and Rutherford Pascal, who's on our advisory board for Phoenix, said kind of jokingly, well, you're part way there. He's written 90 of them. And so I think I've read certainly some of his more important ones, and that's great. But what I just continually am amazed by is you never stop learning. I just reread Good to Great is like, wow, what a great book, and helps you understand, the things maybe you're doing right and wrong, and things you should be doing to be better. And certainly one of those things around being better is intentional leadership, being intentional and aligning purpose and vision, values and action. That is so hard. It's so hard, but I think we might find ways to make it simpler today. Because our speaker, Joseph Price, he's the founder and president of Intentional Achievements. He's been doing this for quite a while. And I see Lita is in the audience as well. She also is an expert in this area. The alignment of these things is so important in leadership. And so, Joe, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for speaking. How would you like to structure the program? How would you like to include people's questions? What's the best way to structure our 50 or so minutes together?
Yeah, so I'll start out by asking folks to participate as much as you can instead of just listening to me talk. I'll be asking some questions and hopefully get some responses. Participate as openly as you can. Be willing to listen and learn and maybe change some of the things that they're doing. Um, Listen for things that you believe may be something that would help you overcome some challenges that you may be facing. And then, as always, just be open and honest about the things that we discuss. And that's the way you get the most out of the program.
What's a good outcome for you? What will people have that they don't have now at the end of the hour?
They're going to have an understanding of the four different roles of intentional leadership and how those roles are being anchored by intentional philosophy and action, and what that means for how we make decisions and how we build team and how we take risks and how we innovate and create breakthroughs.
So basically, we'll all be a little bit more dangerous, it sounds like what you're saying. Dangerous in a
Let's
good
hope
way.
so.
Very good. Well, congratulations on your long career, 35 years of experience in training and development. Are you originally from Philly or Southeast Pennsylvania?
From Philly, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure I knew that. That's awesome. So that makes you humble and knowledgeable and capable and experienced, and you've worked at some really large companies. You've done training at AT&T and T and Lucent and Walmart and Intel and Volvo and Air Products, which I think has big stuff in near Philadelphia or King of Prussia or somewhere I vaguely
That's true.
remember.
Down
Um,
now, hometown.
so you've got a lot of background on that. So thank you for bringing all that to us today, and we look forward to learning more. Please go ahead.
I appreciate it, Doug. Thanks so much. Um, as many of you as I can see, that would be helpful for me and our interchange. Um, and if you let me know just by a high sign or a hand or something, whether you can see those slides that are there.
Yep,
Yes,
we
we
can
can
see
see.
it for
Yes.
sure.
Everybody see
Thank
them?
you.
Okay,
Yes.
great. So we're here today. Thanks so much. We're here today to talk about maybe some new mindsets and behaviors around the concept of being intentional and what that actually means for our leadership. And like we said, the best way to get the most out of the time that we have together is to be open, willing to change and grow, participate as much as you can, listen deeply, and be honest and truthful, and we'll get the most out of this. But in order for us to talk about intentional leadership, and I know intentional leaders in the Global Chamber's mission, so you guys must use it a lot, what the word intentional actually means. So can somebody just sort of yell out what they think the word intentional means?
With purpose.
With purpose. Okay, thank you. Who else? Just shout
No,
it out.
yeah, yeah, no, I understand the direction where I'm going.
Okay, very good.
Thinking about it, actually thinking. What a
Okay,
concept.
yeah, very good. So my company name is Intentional Achievements, and I've been studying intentionality for, I guess, the last 35 years. And there are four things that I've come to that are mainstay of what intentional actually means. The first thing is that being intentional means that you're outcome focused. If you don't know where you're going, how do you know how to create a map in order to get there? And so, in order for us to be intentional, we have to think about the outcome that we want. Every time I have a conversation with someone, in preparation of that conversation, I ask myself, what do I want the outcome of this conversation to be? And everything that I design for the agenda of that conversation is designed to get that particular outcome. So the more intentional we want to be, the more outcome focused we are. Where do we want to be? Where do we want to go? What outcomes do we want? What results do we want over a period of time? And then we can put a plan together in order to get there. Someone said with purpose, and there's actually two things about that. One is with purpose, the other is on purpose. The with purpose side is I believe that if you don't know why you're doing something, then you probably shouldn't do it because it's a reaction to something that just happened. And so the first thing about intentionality is that we have a reason, a purpose for everything that we do. And sometimes I'll go into a situation and say, there are multiple purposes here. What are those purposes that I'm looking for? And what are the outcomes as a result of that? And what do I need to do in order to get them? So, with purposes, I have to have a reason for what I do. And number two, once I have that reason and that outcome, I take deliberate steps on purpose in order to get there. Right? So we have a reason for doing the things that we do, and we have a step by step deliberate plan of action, and that's the with and on purpose. The third thing about intentionality is that everything that we do should be designed by us and not done by accident, reaction, or default, right? We have a tendency to react to the things that happen to us. And as a result, we're not being that intentional about the outcome that we want and the plan of how we're going to get it. And sometimes we leave decisions to happen or the outcome of that decision to happen without making a decision. And we've made that decision by default, right? So our job in intentionality is to do things by our design. And the last one, I sort of like the way this phrase sounds, that we do everything clearly on purpose, consistent in practice, and deliberate in action. Clear on purpose, consistent in practice, and deliberate in action. And doesn't that really describe intentional leadership extremely well? Now, there are two things that I have found over my years dealing with intentionality that people sort of miss. they misunderstand. And the first one is, and I'll need some feedback from you guys on this, is the difference between an intention and being intentional. So can somebody shout out what they think the difference with intention versus intentional is?
Well, Joe, one intention is what I would feel is action versus intentional, meaning you are, I'll use the word purpose, but intention is action.
Okay. And Francis, the interesting part is I agree with you 100% in the opposite. Okay. So, and I'll explain that in just a minute. I saw some heads nodding. So, someone want to respond? So, if you think about it, have you ever had a good intention of doing something, but never wound up doing it? You're going to see in just a minute that intention is desire based and intentional is action based. So, Francis, I agree with you. It's just the definitions are juxtaposed, right? Now, the second thing is the difference between being reactive and being intentional. So, can someone speak up and say what they think the difference between reaction and being intentional is?
The
Reaction.
reaction, sorry,
Okay, Beatrice, go ahead.
the reaction is something that just happened. It was not planned.
Yes, okay,
And
very
the
good.
intentional action is something that you plan to get an objective, a goal.
Super. Thank you. And I know, Lydia, you were saying?
I was saying the same thing that Beatrice.
Okay, good. And Francis, anything to add?
No, I totally agree with Beatrice. That was
Okay.
my thought
All
as
right,
well.
good. So let me show you some differences. First, intention versus intentional. Intention says, I meant to, or I wanted to, or I thought of doing. Intentional is, I made sure to. One's desire based, one's action based. Intention hopes for an outcome and an impact, and being intentional designs it. Having an intention says that you're trying to be clear. Intentional says you ensure that you're being clear. So you can see the differences between the two. And I think the best differentiator here is intention is emotional and intentional is operational. Intention hopes and intentional executes. So let's take a look at some differences on the reaction versus intentional leadership side. So indicate by a show of hands or however you want to indicate. But how many of us from time to time have found ourselves in reaction mode? We're frantic, overloaded, and scattered. We're active, but we know we're not moving in the direction that we need to. We're holding on to control because everything seems to be out of control. Everything is urgent at this moment, and we have a tendency to react easily. And I see some thumbs up. So I'm not the only human here that has a tendency to get on the reaction side. The opposite of each one of those is important for us to understand. Thanks, Jeff. Is that being an intentional leader says that we're focused, anchored, and directional. And we're going to talk about what anchored actually means. But instead of feeling like we have control or need control because everything seems out of control, we're more clear about the processes and the understanding where we're going, and we create calm team effort in order for us to get there. We turn the urgent into the purposeful. So instead of saying, I got to get this done right away because it's a deadline, it is, okay, what's the reason for doing this? What's the principle and the outcome? And is that ultimately where I need to spend my time? And instead of the emotional reaction, it's more principle and action centered. So we can see where we're heading as far as what intentional means, what leadership is. Let's go into depth a little bit about what we see as leadership is not one single role, but a rotation of hats. And I can explain what that actually means. So we believe that there are 4 roles that we play as leaders from time to time. And if we understand these roles as hats that we put on, that when we put that hat on, that role has a certain skill set that's attached to it that we use and do best. And 2, that we are doing things in the most purposeful way for that particular role. So each role has a different outcome that it's heading toward, and each role has a set of skill sets that we use in order to get there. And let me show you what we mean. So the first hat is what we call the entrepreneurial hat. Now, the hat is our form of influence. It helps us understand what behaviors and what outcomes we need to get when we're playing this role. We're going to explain more about it in just a minute. But the anchor is a force that steadies us during periods of unrest or instability. Maybe we get into reaction mode and not sure which direction to go. Our anchor is designed to help us and steady us and give us that direction. So for the entrepreneur, the anchor is their purpose. So let me ask for some feedback as to what you think the role of an entrepreneur might be and what some of the outcomes are that we're looking for when we engage in that role. Think of an entrepreneur that you know and what sets them apart from other leaders.
Joe,
Oh, go ahead.
Joe, I have a question. You say entrepreneur. What about a manager? Of course, that's a typical question, having a manager as leader or an entrepreneur.
Yes, thank you very much. So you're 2 boxes ahead of me.
Okay.
Okay.
I come back later.
Manager is one of our hats. So thank you, Frank. We'll come back to you as soon as we get to that hat.
Okay, Francis, sorry.
Yeah, so Joe, an entrepreneur has a vision, a dream that he is pursuing. And so an entrepreneur brings inspiration to others to follow him.
Yes, good for you. And Francis, I'm going to come back to you again because a couple of things that you attributed to the entrepreneur, I'm going to put in the next category. But you're heading in the right direction. All right. So if you think of an entrepreneur who starts a new business, they're looking to disrupt that industry with their new business. So an entrepreneur is looking for innovation, growth, but they're also looking for disruption. And they're also risk takers as a result of trying to disrupt a particular industry. Does that make sense? So the entrepreneur starts something, and has a purpose and a reason for starting something new, and then takes risks and wants to create something that disrupts the status quo. And then once they establish that, they're looking to grow that impact. So when we put on the hat of an entrepreneur, we take on those outcomes. We take on those skill sets and we say, where do I want my metro area to be in the next 6 months to a year? What do I need to disrupt in the industry, in my community, in my group as it is today, in order to grow it a little bit more? What risks am I willing to take in order to make those things happen? Those are some of the attributes when we're putting our entrepreneur hat on that we're going to exhibit. And our anchor is, why are we doing it from the beginning? The entrepreneur is not going to disrupt an industry unless they have a clear reason for doing it and a clear understanding of the outcome that they want as they're taking those risks and doing that disruption. And so everything that we do in the entrepreneur hat says, what's the reason for doing this? What's the meaning in it? Am I communicating that meaning to everybody else so they're brought on board with me as I make this growth? All right. Now, what's the next hat? Francis? Go ahead, Frank. Unmute yourself. I see your hand.
Sorry, I would attach the word initiative to entrepreneur. I think that's very characteristic for this.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And again, our job as a leader entrepreneur is to build other leaders and other entrepreneurs, and to be able to take the initiative to say, let me have a conversation with these people, find out where they want to go and how I can help them get there, and then take the initiative to be able to do that. Okay. Now, number two, the difference between a leader and an entrepreneur. Once the entrepreneur establishes something, they take a leader role to inspire empowerment within that organization so that everyone else comes on board and takes that same initiative in order to get the outcome that they're looking for. And what's the anchor for the leader? The clear vision of where we're going and the ability to inspire communication so that everybody else sees that same picture and has a desire to take the initiative in order to bring about the outcome. So when we have the leader hat on, we ask ourselves the question of, what's my vision? Have I communicated it effectively? Have I communicated it often? Because if I have a vision, I communicate it once and then people don't hear about it for the next 3 months. How important is that vision? So that picture needs to be so clear in everyone's mind and top of mind that we all want to get empowered and take the responsibility to work as a team in order to get us there. Everybody see the difference now between entrepreneur and leader and the reason for the anchors. Okay. Now, Frank, we're coming to you because now we have to put the manager hat on. The entrepreneur creates, the leader inspires a communication of a picture of where we're going and creates an empowerment culture in order to get there. But what about systems and processes being put in place so that the movement is not person dependent, but systems dependent? And who is there on a day-to-day basis to make sure that quality control is there and motivation is there in order for people to follow the processes in order to get where we need to go. And that's the role of the manager. And when I have the manager hat on, my communication and my motivation skills are guided by the values that I hold. So if I believe in the sanctity of humanity, I'm not going to berate somebody in front of other people when they do something wrong or don't follow a process. Everything that I do is guided by my anchor of my values and the organizational values, and making sure that the people that I work with, all of the values are aligned, because we have organizational values and we each have personal values. Some may be similar, some may be different. And how do we make sure as a manager that all of our values are linked together and complementary instead of causing conflict? Frank.
Joe, one question. I
Please.
think a manager can also be reactive. So he does not need necessarily to be intentional, right?
Give me an example of what you mean.
Sometimes you have managers who just implement decisions, let's say from a supervisory board or for some other directives, let's say. So in that case, they are reactive. Sometimes they are proactive, yeah, even though they might not be entrepreneurs. But if they are proactive, I think they are more leaders, but being reactive, not necessarily.
Okay. So let me ask you what you're saying. Are you saying that being reactive is a good thing or not a good thing?
It's never black and white. It depends on the situation. Yeah.
Okay. So
sometimes
let me tell you how I answer that for everyone's benefit, because I believe this in the core of my being after studying intentionality for 35 years. Anything that's a reaction is wrong. And here's the reason I say that. By the very definition of a reaction, and my definition is a reaction is an action that we take based on an outside stimulus where that action is out of control. So something happens to us, we react to it immediately, and as a result of reacting immediately, whatever it is that caused me to react is actually in control of me. And that's a baseline fundamental principle that I have been teaching for a very long time, right? Now, here's the difference between being reactive and being responsive and intentional. Some people think that reaction happens faster than a response. First, we have to understand what a response is. A response is an in-control action that we take based on an outside stimulus. So something happens, we breathe, count to 3, gain control back, and then make a decision. Now, here's what people do, because moving from reaction to response is a skill like any other skill that we can learn over time to get better and shorten the cycle time for it. And I believe if we really get good at it, our response can be as quick as a reaction. So I would rather managers be trained how to think and act responsibly and in control rather than reactive. Frank, does that make sense?
Yes, if responsiveness comes into place, absolutely. I think it's the consciousness, the awareness, which makes the difference between both.
It is. It's absolutely true. But here's the thing. When you're reacting, everything is unconscious to begin with. Everything intentional, in my belief, means bringing the unconscious to the conscious, because it's the only way you can deal with it. Right? So awareness becomes the first step of change, because we can't change what we're not aware of. Excellent. All right. And if anybody has questions along the way, please raise your hand or yell out. I'll leave time, some time pretty soon for questions and answers on anything that we've been covering. Let me tell you about the last hat. The last hat is what I call the specialist hat. And that is that a lot of us are working managers or working leaders, that we have to do some of the work, but we also have to be detail oriented enough in order to make sure that we know how to get the job done properly. Because sometimes that's the only way we can lead and inspire, is to do it by example, right? And the anchor for the specialist is not intention, but action. So the specialist is concerned and anchored by movement and making sure that that movement is as purposeful as possible. And so when we put on the specialist hat, our job is to make sure that movement is happening, and then it's happening in the way that it needs to happen. And it becomes an opportunity for us to lead by example and perpetuate the consciousness of detail and how important process and all of the rest of everything that we do with managers hat is to the movement actions in order to get the outcome. And so those are the 4 hats that we wear, I believe, in our leadership. And the question really becomes, are you conscious at any given time what hat you're wearing, what role you're playing when you're wearing that hat, and what outcomes and skills you need in order to best serve that particular role that you're playing. And my submission to you guys is this: the more fluent and the more conscious we are at switching hats intentionally, the more effective our leadership is going to be, and the stronger our teams in our metro areas are actually going to become. Now, let me share with you some anchoring messages and ask you guys if you can relate, or if you have an example that is personal. I wouldn't point to anybody else on the screen in case it would embarrass them, but we talked about being honest and truthful. So let's see how many of these you can relate to. Leaders don't burn out from effort, they burn out from misalignment. And what we mean by misalignment here is out of alignment with the roles that you play, the hats that you wear, and the skill sets that you're implementing when you're playing that role. And I really think that when we get misaligned, we move into reaction mode because we know we're misaligned and everything is frantic and urgent and everything that we talked about back on the reaction column.
Joe, my comment, I could relate to this a little bit,
Okay?
because, the 4 hats, as you described, great way of structuring it. We have a tendency, it's not equal in our, how would I say, our standard mode of operation, or, we have certain strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely.
And in certain situations where we have to respond, I would say that I would tend toward my more comfort hat and not address the situation appropriately.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. And I believe that that's absolutely true. And the key really for us is to be so conscious of it that even in an urgent situation, we're conscious enough to say, this requires me to put on this hat and handle this in a responsive and intentional way, instead of not being conscious of that and reacting to it with the wrong hat. And so I absolutely believe that's true. And the more that we study it, the more we integrate what those roles, responsibilities, anchors, and outcomes are for that particular hat, the more fluid we're going to be able to change. Thanks for that. Number two, exhaustion isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of leading without an anchor. Because I believe what happens for us as leaders many times is everything falls into quadrant number one, and we react by going into specialist mode. And we get exhausted very quickly. And I don't know if anybody else can admit or relate, or admit that they relate to that concept. All right, thank you very much. All right, number three, chaos happens when activity outpaces alignment. And I think if you get the concept of the four hats, that's going to make a lot of sense to you. Busyness is not leadership. Alignment is. Because that's when we're in our best. And Francis, one of the things that I forgot to mention in responding to you is that we all have a primary hat that we fall back into. And I think one of the things that we need to do is be honest enough to look in the mirror and say, what's my fallback hat? And what, not just what is it, but why is it? Because why determines how we deal with it. And if we don't know why, we're not going to have the inspiration in order to design a how to be able to not fall back into that hat. So thank you for that. Next one is sustainability and leadership doesn't come from rest. It comes from being rooted in your alignment. We don't need more energy as a leader. I mean, relate. I believe it's not energy that we need. It's more alignment, because when we are in alignment with our roles, everything becomes easier. And there's no way that we're going to need more energy doing less and doing things easier. And the last one is leaders. When we stop asking why, we start drowning in the what. All right, so let me ask you, who has the first question on anything that we covered?
I have a remark, Joe.
Please.
Kind to sum up means intentional leadership to stay consciously in control of your hats. Is that right?
Yes. And thank you for that. It's a great way to say it.
Okay, thanks.
Other comments or questions? Either I did a really good job or I lost you in the very beginning. So I'll make the assumption that I did okay. Okay.
Hi,
Tamika.
Joe. Thank you so much. This was brilliant, and I definitely could see all the ways that I have been doing the what and not the why.
Excellent.
Question for you is, you say the alignment seems to be the key. And when you have all of these hats and you're juggling them, and there are different contexts in the hats where they can sometimes change depending on where
Yes.
you are. How do you stick to your alignment? How do you find the alignment, and how do you stick to it? And in that chaos and the reaction, you're saying that the time has to, like, how the quicker you can get to that, the
That's
quicker
correct.
you're out of reaction. But can you give us some tools? How do we find the alignment, and how do we stick to it?
Yes. The first thing is to spend time on defining the role. And the things that you want to define in the role is, what is the outcome that I'm looking for, and what skill set do I use to get that outcome? Every single hat has a different outcome and a different skill set. And so first step is to define those and that just memorize them and internalize them. And the second thing is a technique that I still use after all this time. I picture a hat, right? Like the picture that I had for you. I picture the hat and I physically picture myself switching hats. And I see a picture of me doing it. And that keeps me conscious. Now, the third thing that I do many times is I'll actually tell people that I'm switching hats. So in order to make it more conscious and to help train your people to hold you accountable and to continue your training, say, look, we just went through the entrepreneurial hat. I'm going to put my leader hat on because I have a couple of questions that I need to ask. And see that picture until you don't need to see it anymore. Does that help? Does that three-step process help? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So I do this in every single meeting that I conduct. We'll get a couple of answers from some folks, maybe those of you who have not participated yet. But we covered 40 some minutes of pretty deep material, and you can't remember it all. So if you think about one or two main ideas that you're taking away from today, that'll help you remember something to be able to take it away. But number two is more important, because I don't care what you know. I care more about what you do with what you know. So based on what you're taking away, can you make a commitment of what you're going to do differently as a result of learning that? So what are your takeaways and what are you going to do differently? Who would like to go first?
Joy.
Angelica from Switzerland.
Yeah, I think I'm sweet. Yeah, excellent. I mean, I'm super impressed about the alignment. I mean, when I got first the message about how to be aligned with purpose, vision, mission, and action, I never imagined that was going to be through different roles in leadership. So that is amazing, I have to say. The question would be, if I cannot picture the different roles within different positions in a company, how would you? Because if a specialist is a specialist, he has to be a leader. I mean, his role. Do you know what I mean? I mean,
yeah.
He's a specialist, and the manager is a manager, but the manager is not an entrepreneur. But how?
Well, let me clarify by asking this question. Why can't a manager be have an entrepreneurial mindset and do things with an entrepreneurial mindset? Why couldn't a manager go into the company and say, I'm going to disrupt the way that we do this because it's not efficient? Why can't a manager put on the role or the hat of an entrepreneur and say, I'm going to take a risk and manage up and hold people accountable up? Why couldn't they play that role in whatever their main role is? You see what I mean?
Yeah, I guess because he's not getting paid for that.
Well, I mean, do we get into leadership to get paid, or do we get into leadership to serve? Right?
No, of course, but then it's risky. It's a risky.
No doubt.
It's risky
But that's the role. That's the role of the entrepreneur, is to determine whether that risk is valuable enough.
Yeah.
A leader's not going to do that. A manager's not going to do that. A specialist is not going to do that. But the entrepreneurial mindset will do that.
Yeah, I think the main difference has to do with ownership. This is,
Explain.
well, the manager is following orders, is following somebody else's vision, but the entrepreneur is trying to bring his or her vision across. And failure or success is directly impacting that person, whether the manager is just fulfilling somebody else's mission. And I don't think either outcome is going to affect him in the same way that it will affect an entrepreneur.
It's possible, right? But it is a risk in certain cultures, in certain business cultures.
Yeah, Joe, I'd like to add to that. You know, we're talking about alignment. We're focusing on alignment of our different roles that we can play. But at the same time, we have to be very mindful of our alignment with the bigger, a broader environment ecosystem, the
That's correct.
company, the organization.
We absolutely are stuck in the middle, right? And the question is, do we have the entrepreneurial spirit enough to be able to manage up and take risk? And do we have the leadership initiative enough to be able to lead down and empower and instill? Right? And that requires different skill sets and a different mindset. Thank you,
And how do
Francis.
you get those skills?
Come to the Intentional Leader Program. No. Okay. So one of the other reasons that I'm here is that Intentional Achievements, my company, one of the things that we're doing is creating what we call intentional living communities. And we're establishing local intentional living communities in major areas around the world. And the cool thing about these intentional living communities is that they're locally based and globally effective, just like your metro area. And so they meet typically once every 2 weeks. There's some core material, educational material that is covered in helping people live more intentionally. And it gives people an opportunity to create relationships, create team, and create community. Your mission in the Global Chamber is to engage and connect leaders through warm, trusted connections and with timely, intentional information to grow business impact and success across regions. The mission of Intentional Living Communities is to inspire, equip, and connect people worldwide to live intentionally. And I believe that there is a synergy that's possible between your local metro area and an intentional community that we would like to build in your area. And so each intentional living community is built on the same 4 anchors that we've talked about that define intentional leadership. So there's a synergy there. It'll help you guys grow your influence by helping members connect with who you are and how you lead and connect with each other on a very different level from the way that you guys meet in your metro area global hat, right? The mission of intentional living communities is to build intentionality, build local communities that have an effect locally and globally. And there can be really some cross pollination between the two. The intentional living community becomes a sort of a human hub for your reach into the community to expand your mission, and it deepens your metro area's mission for your global area. It establishes more trust and retention because you're not just helping people business-wise, but you're helping people grow personally
Absolutely. Mhm.
and be able to create that balance. And then we build alignment between local action and global vision and position your metro as a model for intentional, purpose-driven leadership and growth. And so one of the things that we were going to ask is if helping an intentional living community grow in your area is something that you think is valuable and that you can create some help in, we would love for you to reach out to me and let's have a conversation about how we do that and who we might pick to sort of lead the intentional living group locally, whether it's you or another member of your team. And let's see if we can create some sort of synergy between our two organizations. All of our local leaders and facilitators get trained by us in leadership skills and facilitation skills, and that can improve the leadership and facilitation in your particular area as well. So, any questions about the intentional living communities that you might have?
Thank you, Joe. Great comments, great presentation, great information. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Any final comments before we wrap up? Because we also have another Globinar that's starting. There's
Yes,
a
I
conversation
see Frank's
about-
hand, so maybe he's got our final comment.
I don't know, it's fine, but thanks very much. It's an amazing presentation and approach. Joe, thanks very much for sharing. My major takeaway is a recommendation to Doug to rename the Global Chamber into Global Intentional Chamber. Thanks very much.
Wow. Well, on that happy note, I give everything over to you, Doug.
Yeah, you reemphasized how important the word intentional is to us and to just generally and all the things wrapped up into it. You added a layer of complexity, but also simplicity to all of it. So thank you for your leadership and for your intentionality and also for what you've proposed in terms of collaboration with Global Chamber. It does seem very natural. Frank, you're always amazing. Thank you for your participation and all your comments, and looking forward to continuing to work with you. You're always thought-provoking and give us something to think about. Really appreciate it. Our next conversation is actually starting right now. It's a conversation on trade and tariffs. So that's live, going to start in a few minutes with Thomas Cook, and he'll be talking about tariffs and how to mitigate them. And we have a couple other programs coming up this week. One that's somewhat like what we've talked about here is on tomorrow. And I'm really excited by this. It's our monthly global sales conversation, but it's sales across cultures by three really dynamic women. Our executive director for London, Zainab Al-Karo, and Karina Getz, who probably you follow because she's a preeminent Middle East expert, and also Carla Watt, who is an expert on sales. And their approach, very intentional, very thinking ahead in terms of what needs to be done. And a lot of what I've seen that they'll be talking about tomorrow is you covered today, Joe. Thank you for your leadership in this area, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon. Thank you, Lita, for supporting.
Thank you
Enjoy
for having
the
us.
beach.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tamina. Great comments. Thanks, Beatrice.